So far we've learned how to store collections of data in arrays, but we're going to come up against a limitation on arrays pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and build a file, inputtest.java, so that we can demonstrate how arrays are going to maybe not do everything we need. So we're going to import java.util.scanner so we can get some user input. Then we'll declare our class, public class input test. Then we'll declare public static void main. And we'll give string arguments. So now we have our main method. First thing we'll do is we'll declare our scanner. Scanner in is equal to new scanner, and we'll pass in system.in for this. And then we're going to want to retrieve some values, so we'll give the user a prompt first. System.out.println, enter a number, string line is equal to in.nextLine. We'll use that to store the value. We'll also declare an array so that we can store all of these values. Int array values, and we'll create a counter so we can iterate through this array. Int counter is equal to 0, and then we'll say while not line equals an empty string, values counter is equal to integer.parseInt line counter plus plus system.out.println, enter another number or a blank line to end. And then we'll retrieve line again using in.nextLine from the scanner. So what this is going to ultimately do is allow the user to input some values, and then maybe at the end here we'll put them out on one line. For int I is equal to 0, I is less than counter, I plus plus, system.out.print values I, because we're going to iterate from I all the way up to counter. And then we'll go ahead and separate these by a comma or by a space. We can just use a space here. And we'll say system.out.println you entered. Alright, so now if we haven't made any typos, we can compile and run. And we'll say enter 3, then 4, then 5, and we've entered our values, and everything's fine. So this isn't really a problem just yet. So if we run this again and we say enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, now we get into a problem because our array doesn't grow properly. Now fortunately Java has an object built in that lets you do this. Java has quite a few different collections, and there are several different types of collection objects that we can use. Let's go back into our file, and we've already imported java.util.scanner. We can also import something called a list, java.util.list. We could also import an array list or a linked list. Now, an array list and a linked list are both going to function as a list, but they kind of work a little bit differently. So let's go ahead, instead of using int values and counter here, we're not going to use either one of those. We're going to now declare list values, and we're going to give the list a type. So this is a new concept, but we can say we're going to put integers into this list, and we're going to say values is equal to new array list integer. Now on this line, instead of using values counter, we'll just say values add integer.parseInt line. We don't even need the counter variable at this point. Now instead of iterating through the counter, we can actually iterate using counter. We can iterate through our list. We'll use values, and instead of using values I, we'll use values .get I, because an array list is not an array. We can't use the same brackets and indexes or indices to actually reference the values within it. We use a method, so we use get. And now if we write this out and we compile, and we haven't made any mistakes, see, we made one. See, I made I is less than values, which doesn't actually make any sense to Java because values is an object. So let's go ahead and we'll modify this, and we'll use, instead of values.length, which is what it would be if this was an array, we will use values.size. Now Java, using this array list, is going to keep track of the size of our list. So every value we add is going to increment what we get back from size. So it just makes things a little bit more flexible. And now when I compile my file and I run it, what I'll get is an unlimited ability to enter numbers. Well, limited by my system's RAM, but basically I can enter a lot of numbers. And I can enter as many as I like or as few as I like. The array list will grow. Now the way the array list works is it actually has an array inside of it. So it kind of behaves like an array, but doesn't necessarily mean I have to stop when I get to the end. It automatically grows or resizes itself as needed. Now we can also use a linked list, and you'll see that the linked list is actually, using a linked list here is not going to change anything. We are declaring our variable as a list here. So we're just using Java's generic list type, and we're declaring it as a linked list and an array list. Now the methods that we call are exactly the same, but the way that they work is a little bit different. A linked list doesn't actually use an array inside. It actually stores things in objects that reference each other. So it's a little bit different in that it's probably a little more efficient to add a lot of different things to it, but you can't just get things. It actually doesn't work super well this way. Now you won't notice this in a small program, but what the linked list actually has to do to get I, it has to start with 0 and then count all the way up to I. So this line here for a linked list is a little bit less efficient. Now fortunately, Java gives you the ability to use an iterator that will also allow you to iterate through the values. We'll cover that in the next video. But this should give you an idea of how to use a linked list or an array list instead of an array. Typically, you're probably going to want to use the array list in a lot of cases early on. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to practice your coding.